Trigya, and I just got back from bringing 20 kgs of pineapples from Assam back home.
Wow. Approximately how many pineapples is 20 kgs?
25 pineapples.
That's insane. I've got two questions actually. First question is what were you doing in Assam? And second question is why so many pineapples?
So, starting with the first part, I was working on a community based tourism project in Assam in association with the forest government of Assam. And why so many pineapples? Well, you hardly get them, at least of the good quality, back home in Delhi. So, when in Rome,
Just getting back, just want to introduce you to the listeners. So for everyone listening, this is Trigya Dhir. She's a sophomore at Ashoka University in New Delhi, majoring in economics and public policy with a minor in international relations. Today, we'll just be diving deeper into the choices she's made, the lessons she's learned along the way, as well as I'm sure there'll be tons of like tiny nuggets of insight and wisdom on this podcast for all the high schoolers listening as you're about to embark on this roller coaster of a ride that we all have are going through currently, which is sort of university or college. This 3 4 year experience that can be transformational, life changing if you sort of want it to be that way. So welcome to Uni Unveiled. I'm your host, Arya Road, currently studying at Minerva University. Welcome, Trigya. Happy to finally have you on the podcast.
my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Arya.
Awesome. And I'm really glad we made this happen. I know you were one of the first people I spoke to regarding recording, and you've had a very insane summer, which we'll be diving into in just a few seconds. But I'm really glad we finally made this happen because Minerva and Ashoka have a lot of similarities. They both are about 10 years old, very new age, unconventional. And I think Ashoka is a university that should be much more spread out to the wider Indian audience, especially for people who are hearing the name for the first time. Because from whatever I've heard from you telling me, it's been a very interesting and sort of a transformational experience. But we'll begin with Assam plus the summer as a whole. What have been some of the key highlights of this first freshman year summer break?
So my summer break has been really eventful, but it didn't start like that, I would say. End of second semester, really burnt out, couldn't get myself to move, spent the first 15-20 days just sleeping and
Yeah.
getting scolded by my mother, trying to make her understand that okay, I've just come back, I want to sleep, and that's the only thing on my mind. But yeah, then it started to pick up pace. Throughout this summer I did three different, um I wouldn't call them internships. There were three different jobs that I did, not in the typical sense of the job. So the first one was I ended up research assisting a professor from NYU Abu Dhabi, wherein I did archival work, collecting periodicals, journals, magazines pre 1940, and
Wow.
then adding them to an online database. So that was my research assistantship, and in that I ended up hopping all around North India, went to all these um, ex-colonial cities like Shimla, Amritsar, ended up doing a lot of stuff in Delhi itself, went to Jaipur and similar places. So the first half had a lot of traveling in it for me. And the second thing that I did was I ended up interning for a center in Ashoka itself. It's called the Quetta Center for Digital Health. It's an initiative by the Quetta Foundation to promote digital health awareness, and I still am working with them. And I'm working on a policy review document wherein I am analyzing and curating a document for the global biobank legislations, the legislations that govern the exchange between biobanks, the restrictions and the trends in the global south, and that's what my project is about. The third thing was that I'm involved in bringing community based tourism to tribal villages in Assam. There I'm working with the Assam forest government, and it's a project to bring ecotourism and sustainable tourism into these villages as a means to provide them alternate sources of livelihood and also lessen the load on the forest itself. So, as the communities continue to live there, have autonomy over their resources, and are also able to lessen the burden of their limited, in fact, resources as well. So, that's a project I've been working on. That's where the pineapples come in from.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. Very cool. I'm sure your mom must be much more satisfied now. It's been an
Yeah.
action summer from the likes of what I'm hearing. Um, Most freshmen struggle to get even one internship the summer after the freshman year. On the other hand, you've done three. I'm sure people are dying for me to ask this next question, which is for each of the three internships, how did you actually land them? Like, was it all through just a typical website application, or was there like a more unconventional route to landing these?
So all three of them were obtained through different sources. The RA-ship was through a talk that I attended. It was a talk hosted by Ashoka. My advisor had come there as a speaker. The talk was for 1 hour, and I ended up staying for the next 3 hours as well, just chatting with the professor, talking about things. And at the end of that interaction, he ended up offering me an RA-ship. So
Hmm.
to that, I would just say go to the talks, people. They have a lot of benefit to you, even if an RA-ship doesn't come out of it. I'm sure there is much to learn from the people
Yeah.
that come around.
Hmm.
Um, as for the internship with KCDH, that happened through cold mailing. I found out about them that they were a center in Ashoka. I went and read about them, and I was like, "Hey, this is something I want to get involved in. This is something that resonates with me." And I send them an email
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, I got to know of you. This is something I'd like to work on. These are my skills. Is there anything I can help out with?" I was not looking for an internship. I was just looking to associate myself with them in any way possible. It ended up becoming an internship. And my background in international relations and data analytics ended up being a part of the biobank's database and policy review
Hmm.
project. That is what happened. And as far as Assam is concerned, that is through my personal connections. I have been involved with the Assam government. I have worked on a previous project with them as well. And that organically continued into the next one as well.
Mm. I want to hit the nail like right in the head. I think as a Minerva freshman, especially during my first sem, I thought that like 9 out of 10 people will get their internships through a typical website. You go and upload your resume and cover letter, you hear back from them. What actually ends up happening as a freshman, and this is sort of, don't be disappointed, is that many of them will not even reply. Many of them will sort of reject you on the basis of not even having enough experience, not having dived deep enough into your courses. And so, in my experience, most of my Minerva friends who are doing internships, interesting internships currently, have gotten them through like networking events, conferences, coffee chats, cold emails, personal networks built through high school, like all the different ways apart from that traditional sort of website application. So, I think there's more than one way to get an internship, an interesting internship. And as you said, you need not start out wanting an internship. You just sort of are interested in someone or something, offer your skills, tell them like, can I associate with you in any way? It need not be like quote unquote the internship. So if I want to help you, can we collaborate? Can we work together? And that ends up becoming sort of, as you said, a job slash internship for the summer. So yeah, I'm glad we like drilled that
With
down.
that, I would like to add that do not, under any circumstance, underestimate the power of one to one interaction with the people you're interested in working with, whether
Mm,
it be a coffee chat, a seminar, a talk, an event, a networking event, whatever it may be. Because when you're starting from zero, when you are a freshman and you have zero experience to say for, what sets you apart from other people? It's the soft interaction because all of them have nothing to show for, and it's the details that end up making an impact and you landing an internship in this particular case. So I would
mm,
say go out, attend events. It might be something you are minutely interested in. You never know, it could maybe turn into a area of academic interest. It might be the beginning of a relationship with a professor. It might be the start of an internship. It
Hmm.
might be a volunteering opportunity. It might be an RA-ship. So there's so much to gain out of it. So it's definitely worth taking seriously.
Hmm. I was saying this to you right before we started recording that
Yeah.
probably my biggest regret from San Francisco that whole first year. I think I engaged the city very well. I probably hit all the museums and all the big parks. So as a tourist, I engaged it really well. I think the biggest regret is not engaging with it as a professional in terms of attending enough events, conferences. Um, if you're in any big city, anywhere in the world, I'm going to challenge you that every couple of days there's an event happening somehow, somewhere, with interesting people. So it's sort of just your drive to go online, do some research, and find them. That's happening. If you're in any big city with a decently big population, I'm sure there's stuff happening cater to different interests. Like it's not like in San Francisco, there's only tons of tech events happening. There's all kinds of events happening. So find whatever is passion, whatever is intriguing or whatever you're passionate about. Also completely agree with like any topic that's even like I'm 10% interested in this. I'm definitely not gonna go into this career, but I want to know a little bit more about what's happening in the AI space. Even though I'm like a literature major, go and attend. You never know what will come out of it. It's a few hours of your time. Like the downside versus upside is just if you do the math, I think it makes sense to attend such events. Um, did you have any such experiences where you went to an event where like you just went out of personal interest and something more came out of that event?
Um, Does the Jaipur Lit Fest count? I ended up going to the Jaipur Lit Fest. It's a very big, literally, festival held every year in Jaipur. And it's just not restricted to literature per se. There are experts from different fields there. Um, this year, I think the ex Prime Minister of Australia was also there. So you
Wow.
have policy experts, you have professors, you have writers, obviously. Then you have people like Gulzar coming in and foreign experts. So I ended up going there. It's for 5 days. I intended to attend only 2 days. I ended up going for 4 days. And I attended so many talks. There was this ex-governor of Rajasthan. They were talking about elections as an institution in India and the workings of it. You had people talking about Ukraine and Russia, people like Shiv Shankar Menon, who, by the way, also happens to be my professor for next semester at Ashoka, um, talking about Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Palestine, and the conflict and the implications of that. So it might be a literature festival on the surface. And if I'm, say, an economics major, literature is not on my radar. But what I'm saying is it should be because you go there looking for literature, but you find up so many other things. And if you had not taken that fest in this scenario seriously, you would have missed out on all those other experts talking about non literature fields, which have been helpful to me. So it might look something on the surface, but it can and very probably turn into something else.
Hmm. I'm like slightly jealous because Jaipur Lit Fest has always been on my bucket list, but hopefully I get around to doing it someday. I think what we just said was like macro high level wisdom. And just for listeners who are sort of intimidated by taking that first step of attending that event or going and speaking to that high profile person or professor, let's take it one level down and like talk specifics. So imagine you're in a situation where there's a professor who's given a great talk on XYZ topic. You don't know way too much about that topic. Afterwards, how do you like approach that professor? And what does like the first 2 or 3 minutes of that conversation look like?
Hmm. If you don't know that person, I would say listen to what they're talking about seriously.
Hmm.
If they're talking about their field of expertise, and if you listen carefully, I'm sure you'll understand some of it, and then you'll be able to create a connection with your already existing knowledge database. So you go to them, talk about their talk so that that initial link is established, then try to draw it back and connect it to yourself and how you and that person make sense and talk about the commonalities of whatever they just spoke about because nothing in this world exists in isolation.
Hmm.
Even if they're talking about X, there has to be an overlap with Y. So there are a lot of things to talk about. They're people after all. They're not those pedestalized aliens. So don't be scared of them. That's the biggest obstacle I've seen. You pedestalize someone so much that you become afraid to approach them. That's a very harmful way to look at things. Look at them as people, approach them as people, tell them about their talk, tell them about yourself.
Hmm.
And another thing I've noticed is professionals and experts are really receptive to students and early career professionals because they see someone with drive, they see someone with a long way ahead of them, and they see the potential inside you, and they're like really excited to see, just like how you were to see a little pet or something, a small child. That's how they see you. They want to tell you everything, they want to teach you everything. So go to them with such a mentality, and I'm sure they will help out. There is no reason not to. Be polite,
Yeah,
don't be arrogant,
yeah, yeah.
actually listen, don't be there just for the clout, actually listen to them, and I'm sure everything will work out.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. It's really a game of like practice makes perfect. I've tried like all the different stances because for me a big issue is like how do I even stand when I'm talking to like a professor? Like, do I do this or do I have my hands on my back? Sometimes I have my hands in my pocket. That's pretty unconscious. But something as simple as that will just get refined over time. And so now if I go to an event or conference, I sort of know how to stand, conduct myself, start a conversation. The first 10 might be bad, the next 10 will be like less bad, and then eventually you'll get the hang.
Yeah.
There's always a trial and error phase. It was the same for the podcast. I can see sort of a learning curve, but no one like starts off knowing how to impress a professor and talk confidently for 2, 3 hours. I think it's all like a learning process. That's also a new word I'll add to my vocabulary, which is pedestalize. I've never heard that one before, and it's the first time on the episode as well. I really like it. Um, what's like when a professor asks you, so who are you? What do you do? What's your like 2 minute elevator pitch of yourself? Like, what's your intro?
So my elevator pitch about myself is not set in stone. Depending on who I'm talking to, it's bound to change. Just like my resume, if I'm applying for say one job, I will tailor my resume to that job, and for another job, I would change something, put in something else, take this thing out, add something else which is relevant to that particular job. Just like that, my elevator pitch would also change. If I'm talking to an international relations professor, I would talk about my relevant experience, things that I'm interested in. There's no point talking about, say, environmental science in that particular scenario. That is a part of me, yes, but just not in this scenario. So don't think that you worked on your pitch once, it's now set in stone, you can't change it, you go and blurt the same thing out to everybody. Don't do that. Think about it, change it as and when you go. Everybody is not receptive to the same things. People don't have the same interests. So, as and when you're talking to people, change it up, mix it up, include elements which are relevant. And yeah, that's it.
So from what you're saying, and I'm going to talk about, I think there's commonality here between like resumes and the elevator pitch. From what you're saying, would it be correct if I were to say like you have, let's say, a master resume or a master elevator pitch, which has like a bunch of different things, and then from that you pick and choose when you're talking to like this person versus this person, and the same for resume. Like you have this list of 10 projects, you pick and choose 3 projects for this job and three other projects for this job. Would you agree? Is that sort of a process?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely have a master list, document, whatever you prefer. And
Hmm.
in it, write down everything you have ever done, be it a project, be it an internship, be it a workshop, be it a volunteering job, anything and everything you do which sounds even vaguely interesting, please note it down. Because if it's something really small in size, you will forget it as time goes on. And if I attended this really interesting workshop, it
Yeah.
talked about some really great ideas and such, and I forget about it, and then sometime later end up talking to a person, and that workshop would have been a very good link between us, and if I don't remember it, then that link is wasted.
Hmm.
So write everything down, and maybe once a month go through the document, get a refresher, reset your forgetting curve and such.
Yeah.
And yeah, that should be good enough. It will help you keep in mind whatever you've done. Because yeah, things that you do, things that take time are not worth forgetting, and if you can derive even a little bit of benefit from it, you might as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I'm personally guilty of like having the master resume and the master elevator pitch, but not updating it continuously, as you said. I think
Hmm.
1 month sounds like a good time frame in my mind. I'm sure there's a lot that happens in a month at university and at summer.
Yeah.
But like books you read, I'm guessing, podcasts you listen to, interesting ideas you're working with, projects you're working on, interesting people you met. I think that all should go in. Like it can be long, long, long. But
Hmm.
then you can pick and choose. You can sort of make it into different buckets and sections. Each person will have their different approach. But this sounds like a good idea. Like I've never had a recommendation like this on the episode. I'm glad we actually dived into this. Um, I'm also going to use what you said as an excuse to talk about why it's important to be a well-rounded person in high school. And so when universities are asking for your like 10 different extracurriculars, I always tell people that it's not just for university. Like doing these 10 different things in art and music and sport and these 2 projects in tech and these 5 MUNs will make you someone who's able to talk to like almost anybody through college and beyond. Because someone wants to talk MUNs, you can talk MUNs. Someone wants to talk art and literature, you can talk art and literature, and so on. So,
Yeah.
like being an interesting, well-rounded person, I think goes a long way at events and conferences like these, especially. Um, if I know even like one interesting thing that's going on in the AI space, and I talk to someone who's into AI about that, I've seen that unlock like their whole brain of knowledge. Versus if I ask them a very basic question, they also respond to me on like a basic and a superficial level. Like I've seen this happen in my case. Uh, yeah, I think let's rewind a few years in time. Let's look at high school Trigya, who was like about to make some important decisions about majors and university and which country she's going to study in. Let's start with the first decision, probably a very micro decision, which is the major. You, from what I remember, because we've known each other for a little bit now, you began very interested in environmental science, sustainability. A lot of your projects were centered there. How did you get from environmental science to what you're currently studying at Ashoka, which is like slightly different?
So this has been a journey. I come from a CBSE background. There is nothing called environmental science or sustainability as a subject, at least in my school. I don't know if other schools offer it. CBSE is really restricting in that way.
Hmm.
So my outlet for that was biology. I was and still am really interested in biology, but especially so in the ecology part of biology. So I was a science student in 11th and 12th. I had physics, chemistry, maths, and biology. I ended up taking physics only because it came as a pre-packaged deal. If you have to take biology, oh, physics and chemistry are going to tag along. I like chemistry, no hate there. But oh my god, I absolutely despise physics. I'm sorry to all the physics people out there, but no, not my cup of tea. No physics for me. I ended up doing it somehow. Don't remember how. But yeah, so biology. That is what happened. I really like maths. I've always been into the quantitative side of things, but I also really like the qualitative aspects of everything around me. So I ended up studying. I ended up doing well, if I may say so. And after that, I went to Ashoka. So um, there was never a major in my mind. Oh, I want to do X major and X major only. That was never the case with me. I was always open. I was always considering options. This major, oh, this sounds interesting, might do that. This is new, this might do this. Oh, this is also interesting. That's always been the case with me. So there was no hard and fast decided major for me, at least in my case.
And then entering Ashoka, being someone who's had relevant experience in like biochemistry, physics, environmental science, sustainability, how did that pivot into like the more social sciencey fields you're currently studying? Like, how did that interest develop?
So I am now pursuing economics, public policy, and IR. Although I may not have any formal education in those domains in the schooling years of my life, but I ended up pursuing those subjects outside school. I have done many projects in those domains. I have done online courses, and I would say I have an aptitude towards that. I view my schooling years and the subjects I ended up taking as tools in my belt.
Yeah.
So there is no regret in my mind. There is no like, oh, I wasted studying science, blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. I feel that by me doing those subjects, I am now a better thinker, quite frankly. There is no fear of anything too complicated. I know I've done it once, I can do it again. I also have a very good understanding of maths. I still am pursuing maths. I've always liked maths. Don't know why that didn't translate into physics, but moving on.
Maybe this answer is a pleasant surprise to listeners, but at Ashoka, you can apply undecided, correct? Like you can apply not knowing what you
Yeah.
want to study. How late into the journey can you like finally declare your major?
You declare your major at the end of the third semester.
Wow. So what sophomore year?
Yeah,
Until
one and a
then,
half years for you to tinker around and find out.
that's revolutionary, like for Indian universities. Like this is pretty common in the US and some other countries, but that's very
Mm.
new for India. That
Yes.
I'm sure that's a big pull factor for Ashoka. And I'm sure at this point, like you seem like someone who's really enjoyed the journey. But if you were to distill that into like, let's say, two or three of the main pull factors, why Ashoka over any other good Indian university?
Because you can apply undecided. I feel
Uh-huh.
like straight out of high school is too early for me to restrict myself in one chosen path when I don't even know if my head is put on straight. I simply couldn't entrust myself to decide my future for me. I feel high school for me was very restrictive in a way. I felt that I didn't have the opportunity to explore as many domains as I would have wanted to. And straight out of school, I didn't feel like, okay, I'm doing chemistry honors. That just didn't feel like it. Um, so I ended up going to Ashoka. In the Ashoka application, they ask you to list out your preferred majors. There is no permanency to them. They're just to indicate the direction your application is going in. I ended up putting biology, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm very far from it now. So yeah, that's my biggest factor, I would say.
Let's expand on the Ashoka application. I'm sure it's different from other traditional Indian universities. I'm not. I don't think you had like the typical entrance exam, which many of our friends are doing.
Yeah.
But we actually break down the different components of the application. Plus, you can also walk through how you tackle each of them strategically. Like, what was your mindset for each of these components?
So the Ashoka application is in three parts. The first is a application form. It's very similar to the common app, I would say. The
Okay.
second is an aptitude test and an essay component, and the third is an interview. So when you're applying, this is the web page application thing, common app equivalent. It has a series of questions. It has those general name, date, address, etc. there. And then they also have other questions. They ask for test scores, SAT, IELTS, TOEFL, etc., etc. It's optional, it's not compulsory. And then they also ask for really interesting questions, I would say. My favorite part, at least of the written application, were the questions they asked. Um, there was a section they asked us to list five books that we have been or have read in the past and like them. So there was that. There was also a section which was really exciting and surprising to see in a college application of all places. That a question which asked about if you were to be friends with two characters, fictional characters, whether from movies, books, who would those be?
Hmm.
So I remember one of the characters I wrote. It was the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland.
Hmm.
Uh, do you know of that character? It's that cat with the very big smile.
Yeah, this I
So
love this quote from the cat, which is Alice is asking something to the cat, and the cat says, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there." And that quote is like has become one of my all-time favorites. Sorry, I just
definitely. So that quote and that character and my vision of that character is something I want to be friends with,
uh,
because the people you surround yourself with have a very big impact on who you turn out to be. So I want to be surrounded by people or cats like the Cheshire cat, so that those values diffuse into me and I am able to become something like that.
Mm.
So that was one of my answers. We also had a long form answer about you're sitting with your friends late night at Ashoka, you're talking about something, what would that something be? So I ended up writing about social injustices and the stereotypes and perceptions our mind already has about someone,
Huh.
whether it be by listening to them, looking at them, seeing what they're wearing. The
Yeah.
reasons are many. So I ended up writing about that. That this is something that is on my mind. This is something I would like to talk to other people about. So that was the application. It had the test scores. It had the other details. Um, and after you submit the application, there a week after it, you are supposed to give an aptitude test. It is like an IQ test, I would say. Those pattern questions, 10th grade math, and very simple questions, I would say. It's an hour-long test, and after that, in continuation, you have an essay component as well, where you're given a prompt, a situation, a scenario, and you're supposed to respond to it. And yeah, that's it. And after that, a month or so after, you're invited to an interview, if at all. Um, so the interview was my favorite part of the entire application, I would say. My interview went really well.
Mm.
I enjoyed it. That's why it went well. Uh, so I was interviewed by two people from the admissions department. We ended up talking about biology, ecology, about sustainability. We talked about engineering. We talked about NEET, JEE exams. We talked about pet peeves. What don't you like, etc., etc. So it was a really nice and chill conversation, kind of like the podcast right now.
Yeah.
It's great, yeah.
Apart from the general Gyan which circulates about interviews, and like sort of the high level basic stuff, some of that has been covered on the podcast already. Any specific tips and tricks or do's and don'ts when giving an interview to admissions officers?
So my approach to interviews is really simple and it has worked out well for me, I would say. What I do is I take a sheet of paper, I create a mind map on it. It has all the things I think I want to talk about. It has the things I think they would ask me, and I kind of just write few bullet points, flesh out those points slightly, and just keep it on a sheet besides me. I don't read off it. That's something you should completely avoid. Don't read off something in an interview, but I keep it besides me so that as and when I'm talking, I can just glance at it and see if there's something I've missed, there's something I'd like to include. It's kind of like the master resume document. It's just for you to refer to in case you miss anything, and that missing thing might help you up your stance.
Mm-hmm.
Keep that at hand. There is no standard template to that either. It will and should change for different interviews that you're giving. But approach an interview, it's a case to case situation, I feel. Some interviews are serious, and being casual in them would do you more harm than good. Some interviews are casual, and it is better if you act casually in them. So, see what the situation in particular is and adjust according to that.
I agree. I think you even touched on a lot of different bases there in terms of preparation, attitude, the actual interview itself. I think the beauty of the interview and why I feel like the interview is the last round versus the first round is that it's the very final screening process where it's more about, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, will this person be a good fit for Ashoka in terms of their personality, their likability? Will they fit into the culture or the atmosphere of our college? Whatever that means. We'll be discussing that further on the episode.
Definitely. One
Um,
of the questions I was asked was, why a liberal arts education? Why are you doing this? If you come from such a background, why are you digressing into, say, a completely parallel stream?
Mm.
My answer was similar to what we have been talking about. My educational experience, my schooling, my extracurricular experience. There's so much more to me, right? So I want to be in an environment to nurture those aspects of me, and hence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
We've done a deep dive into the interview. Going to the entire rest of the application, and you can do any section or you can do the application as a whole. For the rest of the application, any sort of do's and don'ts, tips and tricks, best practices or strategies. I'm assuming many people listening might be thinking of tackling the Ashoka application and are sort of like wondering. It's not as straightforward as like giving a JE, where it's just you prepare, you study, you go and give it. Like there's no right answer here, but any sort of like even a mindset suggestion you can give, I'm sure would be helpful for like listeners.
Definitely. A big tip that I have is do not lie on your application. Do not write or talk about things that you haven't done or don't have an in depth understanding of. Because if you qualify for the interview, your interviews do go through your application and you will be asked about the things you have written. And if you're not able to back it up,
Mm.
that's going to be really bad. So do not lie. I know it's tempting. I know it's tempting to buff up your
Yeah.
activities to like fudge up the figures and stuff like that, but don't do that. That is very risky, it's unethical, and just too bad for you. So be honest. Even if you done say two things but they have substance in them, you'll be able to talk about them, you'll be able to write about them for a lot of time. So yeah, don't lie.
What I've learned from this guy, Chris Vox, who's like an expert negotiator for the FBI, so he said that most people will be able to catch a lie. And the reason for that is people tell the truth only in one way, but people have 101 different ways of lying. And so I think, as from an admissions officer point of view, someone who has that experience, they're going through like this is day in and day out for them, right?
Huh?
I genuinely feel like they'll be able to sniff it out. And it's too much anxiety and worry to even be taking that gamble, in my opinion, of whether they'll like snip it out or not. Like I would rather underplay a little bit and be very honest and open. This is what I've done. This is what I can speak about versus like and on an in an interview, making up facts on the spot takes like a lot of intelligence. Like it's not that easy to be able to like create stories and weave stories in the middle of an interview when you're talking to two experienced people. So
Definitely.
I wouldn't put myself in that position, to be very
You're
honest.
making it tougher for yourself by lying. If you want your interview to go smoothly, you better off sticking with the truth.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm gonna rewind a little bit into one specific section of the application, which I'm sure is like maybe even confusing for a lot of the listeners, where I think a lot of us have the mentality that like a lot of my friends told me that like why aren't college applications more straightforward? Like why isn't it just a test score and if you get above a certain amount you get in, if you get below a certain amount you're out? Why do they have all these other components which are so ambiguous, the extracurriculars and the essays? And so what intrigued me specifically about what you said about the Ashoka application was the questions like who is your favorite character? What would you talk about late night with Ashoka students? I know you're not an admissions officer, um, but from your perspective as a student, why do you think Ashoka cares about like your answers to those particular questions?
See, if the question you're asking is why are college applications not cut to the chase, meet and meet a threshold and you're in, but but that system exists, right? There are colleges in India who follow that practice.
Hmm.
There are colleges whose applications follow that system. You meet a certain score and you're automatically in. So it's not to say that a system like that doesn't exist. If that's something that you prefer, please go ahead and pursue those places. That's not what I'm saying. In the case of Ashoka, I feel college applications are like a sneak peek into the institution itself. You're applying to an institution, and the vetting that they do is reflective of the institutional values. So
Hmm.
the application of Ashoka asks about scores. Yes, it is an academic institution after all. You won't get there if you're flunking your classes. So there are scores, yes, obviously, but there is more to it because I feel those are the institutional values of Ashoka. I, as a student, I, as an applicant, am more than just my test scores. There are books I read, there are movies I watch, there is stuff that I do. I have hobbies. And I feel Ashoka, at least in the application, provides a space for you to express those,
Hmm.
because learning comes in all forms. It is not just restricted to the classroom. If I am pursuing a hobby, if I'm an athlete, in me pursuing my sport, I am learning discipline, I'm learning teamwork. Those are skills you might not always get from the classroom, but those are skills. After all, there are different types of intelligences, right? So in an application which gives you the venues to portray all parts of you, that is what Ashoka is trying to do. So the Ashoka application has everything that other colleges have,
Hmm.
but more.
Hmm. I genuinely hope we're breaking some mental barriers of people listening. This could be like parents, teachers, students. I would be like thrilled if this episode is the first time someone is coming across the name Ashoka, and if by the end they're like even slightly interested and they go check out the official website and they're like, okay, I'll just apply here. Let's see what happens apart from these other like colleges I'm applying to. That would be like the win of this episode. Um, I personally just offer what you said. Listeners can feel free to like disagree completely, and there are options for those who like disagree with me completely. As you mentioned, I personally would go to a university where I personally would not go to a university where everyone is like a 100 student and they don't do anything else in their free time but study. I would rather go to a university where everyone is a 70 or an 80 or 100 student and they do like 10 different things in their free time. Like you have athletes and you have musicians and artists, and economics Olympiads people and programmers and all of that. That's my personal choice. Some people would want the 100 institution. I think we have institutions like that in India. But for someone who's like not wanting that or is tired of that path, I think Ashoka is like an interesting alternative. Um, Leading
like
off of
you just
that.
said, like you
Sure.
just said, there are institutions and there are peoples. I have my values. I'm sure you'll find some place that has similar values to you. There is no right or wrong. There are just differences. And those differences do not imply that one is superior or one is inferior. They're just different. And that's the fact. There is no point of conflict here, or at least there shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you can't compare apples and oranges. I might like apples, but you might like oranges. That doesn't mean oranges or apples are bad. They
Mhm.
just are preferences. And
Mm.
it is very foolish to have a comparison between them because you can't compare different things.
I like the metaphor. Yeah, apples and oranges. Cool. How would you, now that we're on the topic of like value, these big words of like values and culture, and this is what an institution prioritize and student community, how would you like, as a student who's been there for a year, how would you describe the ecosystem or the community or the atmosphere at Ashoka?
One sentence, there is something for everybody.
Huh.
Whether it be it's futile for me to go into depth because I can't possibly do it justice. All
Mhm.
I would say is there's something for everybody. There are your people, there are your activities, there are your interests. You'll find your people. That's it. Because of the diversity inside the four walls of the college, whether it be in students, whether it be in our professors or our staff or even the fellows, I would say. Ashoka has a lot of simultaneous programs. There is the undergraduate program, you have masters, you have PhD, you have young India fellows, you have research scholars, etc., etc. So I personally am friends with a lot of PhD people. Who would have thought that will happen, right? So you'll find your people. It's nothing to worry about. Just put yourself out there.
I did a deep dive on the Young India Fellowship like a few months back when I was just like very interested and I had a friend who was actually pursuing that. So for listeners who are hearing this for the first time, can you say two sentences about what is the Young India Fellowship?
So the Young India Fellowship is a fellowship program for graduate students, for people who have pursued their education in a non-liberal arts field. So we have YFs who are engineers, who are lawyers, who are medical professionals, etc., etc. They all come in and do a 1 year program. YF is a 1 year program, and it is capped at 100 fellows per year. And they come in and then they explore different subjects. They have that 1 year to mess around. If they feel they want to explore economics and they come from a law background, they are able to do whatever they want so as to create a particular niche for them, explore unexplored domains, their interests, etc., etc. So that is what the fellowship is for. It is actually the first program Ashoka started before the university itself was established.
Interesting.
So YF has been happening since I think 2011-12, I would say, whereas the university itself started in 14.
So honestly, something even I'm curious about. Like, and there's a completely different set of answers from the Minerva point of view. I'm sure
Mm.
it has like a completely different set of answers, but both these institutions are so young, like a decade old compared to like institutions which have been around for centuries. But at least in my circles, I've seen a lot of buzz like around Ashoka as an institution. People are interested, people are applying, at least curious to hear more, check it out, see the campus. Again, as a student, you're not on higher management, but I want to hear this from like a student's perspective. Within just a short period of time, what do you think Ashoka has done right to sort of like grow so fast and become this genuinely one of the like leading institutions in India?
So there's one thing I would like to say to this, and that is age does not guarantee prestige.
Huh.
Just like how age does not guarantee respect, uh,
Mhm.
I am not obligated to respect someone just because they're elder to me. Respect has to be earned.
Mm.
And if someone is younger to me and if they're respectable, that does not mean I won't respect them just because they're younger to me. Age, respect, and prestige have nothing linking them together.
Mm.
So, just like how respect has to be earned, prestige also has to be earned. You have to have something to show for it. Ashoka might be a young institution. It's as old as Minerva, I would say. And you, of all people, should understand
Yeah.
that even if you're young, there's so much you can do. There's so much you have already done. There are so many bright minds working together. There's so much research output happening. So 10 years is more than enough, I would say. It only takes so long to make an impact. And I feel institutions like Ashoka have already done that. So, as far as it's a question of me being at a relatively young university, I don't think that's a matter of concern
Mm.
because age does not equal any kind of respect or prestige. It
Mm.
has to be earned. You have to have something to show for it, and Ashoka does. So,
Mm.
that is not a point of concern.
If you're like a student listening to this and you want to go to Ashoka and you need to convince your parents, like show them this particular Q&A section, I think. Um,
Definitely. And if the rebuttal you get is, oh, there are so many older institutions, I would say Ashoka has done so much more than institutions twice or thrice its age as well till date. So, age is not something you should think about.
I think one of the big benefits of going to a very young university, if this is something of interest to a listener, is that they're very agile. And so every year is like new experiments. Okay, this is not working. Let's switch it up. New like hypotheses being tested. At Minerva, like every year experience is different. There's like some law in the student handbook that changes every year, some new club that starts every single year. If you want to go to an institution that's like very agile, I'm assuming also that leads to like listening much more to student feedback and like making those relevant changes in higher management. Then I feel like a younger school has those advantages for sure, versus a school like a Harvard, which has this legacy and has been around for so long, where I'm sure it's harder to like change things and like the laws of the student handbook. So,
Definitely.
yeah.
And you might have noticed the trend in whatever I've spoken till now. I've spoken about changing your resume, changing your
Uh-huh.
elevator pitch, changing your interview script. So, change and the ability to change and adaptability is something that I greatly value, whether in myself or in my institution. And to be able to adapt to any or all curveballs thrown your way is a really important skill because survival of the fittest, after all, if you don't change, you're going to die off. So that uh, analogy applies to other aspects of your life as well.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, Mr. Darwin.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, on for this first section of the episode, we've already talked. I think we've already done a lot of convincing as to why Ashoka is a name at least worth considering for someone who doesn't want to go the very traditional path and wants to stay in India. We've talked a lot about your application. We've gotten to know you as a person a bit better. I want to ask one more question, which is about the student body at Ashoka. I think something very valuable about which Ashoka is offering, which is probably not the case at many other Indian colleges. I don't have data, but this is a big assumption I'm making, is international students coming in. And so you've got students from like 28 countries in your class, if I'm not wrong, who are coming and studying here. Have you seen value in that versus like, let's say going to a school with, I'm guessing your high school was like mostly Indians. Like, what has been the difference?
So my school had no international students, so there's definitely a big jump. But yeah, my batch at least has people from 25 plus countries, and I couldn't see myself without those people at Ashoka. One of my best friends is from Ethiopia, and they
Wow.
have been teaching me Amharic. So that has been fun. The international body constitutes a really important part of the students, I would say. They organize country specific events similar to the 1001s at Ashoka. We
Hmm.
get to know about their cuisines, we get to know about the culture, the music, the life. So it has been great. Other than the UG students, we also have batches of international students from Ashoka and its partner universities.
Hmm.
So we had this group of, I think, 10 French students from Sciences Po,
Oh,
and they
wow.
spent like an year at Ashoka, and I ended up being really close friends with one or two of them.
Okay.
And they told me all about their university and things. Because just because we are from different cultures, there are differences in our upbringings, in our societies, in our values, and it's really nice to be able to see another perspective. So that is something I really enjoy and I really like about Ashoka, to be able to interact with so many different people.
Do you feel like a lot of your learning at from what you're saying, do you feel like a lot of your learning at Ashoka happens outside the classroom?
Definitely. Our classes are, so the pattern Ashoka follows is there are two classes a week, and then we also have a discussion session every week. The discussion session is headed by a teaching fellow who are graduate students or even PhD students for that matter. One of my classes last year was TF by a PhD student at LSE.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great. Most of the things that we learn about in class are discussed about in the discussion sessions, and we end up going into really random tangents, discussing about things that we thought about in class. So it's a place for you to really think.
Mhm.
You can stay back after classes, talk to professors, go to their offices, go for office hours, but as far as outside the classroom is concerned, yes, you learn so much from the people around you, and it need not always be the stuff you are studying.
Yeah.
Like I said, you are the sum of the people that you surround yourself with. If you are with seven clowns, you'll become the eighth clown. But if you are with people that you admire or desire to be, maybe you'll start moving in that direction. So definitely, yes.
Yeah, I think mirroring is something that like everyone who's not heard the term before should Google. It's a very important concept in psychology where like let's say we're having a conversation right now, you will like subtly be picking up a lot of cues from me in terms of how I'm sitting, behaving, talking, and you will sort of mold yourself into the trigya that that you think I expect you to be on this episode. And so that is true even beyond like this podcast. Like when you're talking to, you'll see that when you're talking to a fun friend versus a very intellectual friend versus a professor, a lot of things about your body language and the way you're talking will change. Like you will seem like a different person. I see this also when people are talking in like one language versus the other. And so I think the people you surround yourself with is sort of, we pay for the education, but like this is something which is like not part, there's not a number to this in terms of cost. But I feel like a big factor in choosing the university that I want to be going to is whether I'm going to be surrounding myself with people who are like who I look up to, like literally in terms of inspiration and accomplishments. Um, Someone described the Ivy Leagues as like a club membership for these
Yeah,
very intellectual and highly
I was thinking
talented.
about the same thing. Yes,
So they're like, the education is broadly 80% the same. What you're getting in an Ashoka versus an Ivy League versus a US university that no one knows of, you're paying for the student body. Like, absolutely. You're paying for the professors as well. It's think of it as a club membership. I think that's such an interesting metaphor to be using. Uh,
definitely. To that, I would say, especially in today's times, education is everywhere. I can open up Google and learn about anything I want, even from a Harvard professor. There are courses everywhere for you to do. So, education earlier, you used to pay for education because it was not available anywhere. Now, since that's not the case, priorities have shifted. You go to an institution because of the conditioning that they provide. If
hmm,
you go to, say, Harvard, you are going. Why is the Harvard brand revered? It's because Harvard as an institution has already done the vetting at the start of the application and then put you through 4 years of a specific kind of conditioning and then given you out as an output. So if I, as an employer, am to seek someone, I know if that person is from Harvard, this is what they have undergone.
yeah,
And it's like a quality stamp, I would say.
yeah,
Nothing more, nothing less. The learning depends on me, but what I do with that learning, how I take that conditioning, how I take that exposure, how I utilize those connections, that is what makes me different from the layperson.
hmm,
So you're
hmm.
paying for the club membership, like you said, instead of the education. So things have changed because the world has changed.
Yeah. I was speaking to an IITM who's actually going to be coming on the podcast very soon. That's an episode I'm very excited about because I don't even know the ABCs there. Like I haven't never even done the basic research. So I'm excited to pick her brain about so many things. But she said something which absolutely blew my mind, which is why do a lot of like top consulting companies come to IIT and hire people for business roles, despite knowing that most of these IITians are engineers, like they have done math and CS and mechanical. It's because they know that this person has like personally grinded so much to get to the IIT. Through IIT, they've gone through the grind. And so at this point, they know in terms of qualities that hard work is a given or like being able to learn is a given. They take them on the job and then they train them on the job for a couple of months. And then these people get into business roles despite being like engineers for all of their lives. And so, especially in terms of the name or the title, I think we've talked about one side, which is about how it doesn't matter to an extent. To the other side, I would actually say that sometimes a title will like this is just a crude truth about how the world works. Like sometimes the title will open up doors in your life. And so if you're able to get to that title, there are people who say like get into a great school and then drop out. Like get into a Harvard, spend a few months, drop out. That just broad signaling to employers. So I mean, there's a whole tangent we could go on here, but I feel like there's some very interesting insights. What I will pick your brain a bit about now is some specific aspects of Ashoka that actually make it different. So we've been throwing around some terms like liberal arts curriculum. You can decide your major after like the first 3 semesters, specific aspects of the student culture and the body. We'll actually be diving into some specifics now for like the next section of the episode. The very first specific I want to dive really deep into, and I'm sure that this is going to spend some time on this, is your very, very interesting first year curriculum at Ashoka, where everyone, if I'm not wrong, goes through these same 9 courses, the FCs or the foundational courses across disciplines and fields. And so your first year is no major specific courses. So far, am I correct in terms of facts?
I will correct you there. We do have 9 FCs, but all of them are not finished in the first year. The
Okay.
first semester, though, we all do 4 FCs, but in the second semester, we have the opportunity to do our major and minor courses along with spaced out FCs.
Okay.
So you can like space your FCs out and might be finishing them in, say, your third year or so. So there
Okay.
is no compulsion to do it all at once in the first year itself, but the first semester, you're right about.
Perfect. Perfect. No, thank you for clarifying. Um, Thank you for clarifying. Let's actually dive into the FCs. And so there's different angles to look at this. I want to start off with just the basic facts, which is what are the FCs? Like how many ever names you can remember? Like what are these 9 courses? And why what's Ashoka's motivation for making you go through these?
So we have 9 FCs. I'll name them out for you. The first one is called, there is no order to them, it's just how I remember them. One of them is Great Books, the other is Literature and the World, the third is Indian Civilizations, the fourth is Mind and Behavior. Then we have Principles of Science. We also have Introduction to Critical Thinking. We have QRMT, which stands for Quantitative Reasoning and Mathematical Thinking. And we have EVS, Environmental Science. So those are the, did I cover all nine?
I think so, yeah.
If I'm missing something, please forgive me.
All right.
But yeah, these are the courses. As the name suggests, they cover really broad domains. And every time a course is offered, at least 3 or 4 professors offer it. So depending on the professor's particular experience, their expertise, the flavor of the FC can vary from professor to professor. So if we are talking about, say, Indian civilizations, some professor, if they are from a anthropological background, can focus on such domains. We had in my first semester, one of the Indian civilization courses offered was on medicine. So Indian civilization and its approach to medicine, all those Ayurveda and Jari Bhuti wala system in India. So that was a different flavor. And then we have, so there are multiple courses offered every semester. All FCs are offered all semesters, but different professors offer them. So if you want to take it up, say, with a specific professor, you wait it out, you match your semester plans, etc., etc. So your experience with a particular FC can greatly vary depending on who you took it with. Your learning outcomes, the things you were taught in that class, depend greatly on the professor. That is something that Ashoka gives the liberty to professors. They can decide their curriculum, their policies, things that they expect from students, attendance policies, etc., etc. So there is no fixed template for it. It varies from each and every professor.
These, I'm sure these eat into the time which like you could have been spent on major specific courses. So it's definitely a huge trade-off. Like I'm sure there are pros and cons. From a student perspective, from your perspective, how do you feel about these 9 FCs being compulsory? Like, do you think students should have an option of maybe doing 4 or 5 and then leaving the rest? What are your thoughts now that you've taken, I'm assuming, some of the 9 so far?
Yes, I have completed 6 FCs.
Okay.
Yes. I feel all 9 are compulsory. They should be done by everybody. Why is that the case? Because they're already divided into really broad domains. And like you said, it's important for us to be a well rounded individual. You should have an understanding of things that you're not pursuing academically as well. If I am a physicist, I need to know about, say, economics if I want my, say, if I'm working in renewable energy, if I'm working on XYZ technology, I need to have an understanding of the market to understand the feasibility of the technology, to understand the ROI on my work. So that is something that everybody should know because, like I said earlier, also, nothing exists in a bubble.
Yeah.
There is no such thing in the world or in our careers as well, which is like completely isolated from everything around it. It's simply not possible. And for you to work in your domain, you have to keep up with things that go around you. And FCs are a really good primer for that, I feel. As far as taking 4 or 5 are concerned, how do you choose those 4 or 5 out of 9? How do you prioritize something above another? Because in my opinion, all of them are equally important. You can't just leave out something and pick something over it. That's like, who are you to make that decision? Who are you to pedestalize FC over the other? I
Yeah.
know we all have our interests. Coming from a science background, QRMT might be easier for me. It might be very hard for someone who is coming from an arts or humanities background, right? But quantitative skills are important, and it is something you will encounter in, say, political science. You need to do data analysis. You do need to have an understanding or be able to manipulate data or at least understand it. So these are all skills that everybody should have, regardless of their majors.
Hmm.
I feel all 9 of them should be compulsory.
Okay. Okay. And it would be interesting to have an Ashoka student on the episode who disagrees with this, and I'm sure that that will be there in the future, and someone will sort of rebut. But from your end, I think that's a pretty strong argument. I agree. Like I am in favor of what you said. My personal example from Minerva is that even our first year we take 4 cornerstone courses. So very quickly, one is social sciences, one is arts and humanities, one is natural sciences, one is CS and math. And so probably the CS and math course was the one I was like least inclined towards. I was like, I don't want to be diving deep into this. Um, on the other hand, philosophy has always been a huge interest to me. Like I know that even at Minerva, I want to be doing a few philosophy courses for sure, and that might lead up to a minor. The very first unit of our CS and math course was actually called Introduction to Logic, Deduction, Induction, Fallacies. After the whole unit was over, I came to know that this is actually classical philosophy 101, whatever we studied right here and right now. And so I think even in terms of a mindset or a way to approach the world, a social scientist will approach the world very differently from like a biologist, from like a historian, from a literature person. If you can cultivate like even a bit of each of these mindsets, I think like potential is unlimited. Like as a biologist, if you can think in a more creative way, if you can think through a historical lens, if you can think through an economic lens, that definitely sets you apart from the other biologists who have been only trained all their lives to think like a biologist. So
I would like to add to something that you said.
yeah.
Ashoka actually offers an interdisciplinary major in computer science and philosophy.
Okay.
Uh, so that is something that's out there. It's just not a one-off that you experience. It's actually a thing, and I'm really glad that the people behind that major at Ashoka realized it, and it's an option for you to take. CS majors at Ashoka have to do biology courses and physics courses. So there is endless possibilities for you to go into different streams and such.
Wow.
So the FCs, I as a economics IR public policy major, ideally would have no opportunity to go into philosophy. But in my grade books courses, I ended up reading about Malthus. I ended up reading Swami Vivekanand. I ended up reading the Bible, in fact. Ended up reading Bulle Shah's poetry. So that is something I wouldn't have encountered otherwise, however hard I tried. So that is something which you have to have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the very last, I love getting into specific examples of this, especially if listeners are still skeptical. A very specific example I have is a friend who was at Swarthmore, did a computer science major and a philosophy minor out of completely personal interest. Like he knew there was nothing he would do with philosophy after he graduated, proper software engineer. He's currently working with AI, and he's so glad he's taken philosophy courses because now when he makes like those decisions about data and ethics, he actually uses some of those theories and philosophers. So I mean, I genuinely think you can never know where some random concept comes into use. 10 years down the line, you're working on your career, this one history concept you studied in school might just like come to the top of your brain. I've heard so many wild stories that I no longer like don't believe that they are true. And so with you also, I want to be going one layer down. We've been talking higher level here about the value of like this liberal arts and broader curriculum. For someone like you with your like specific professional interest in mind, maybe this is like a course on literature or history in your case, which I'm assuming are like more unrelated to what you're doing. Have there been any like mind-blowing moments where something from any of those unrelated courses sort of had this interesting connection to your future or what you are studying in like an economics class or a public policy class?
I don't know about that, but I have always had a lot of interest. So I have always been interested in geography and linguistics. So in my literature and the world class, we were reading Shakespeare. We were reading A Thousand and One Nights. We were reading Ovid.
Hmm.
So we came across in A Thousand and One Nights the city plan, the concentric circles of the city.
Hmm.
And the linguistic traveling of terms. And it was a literature class, but the professor ended up explaining us the Silk Route and the transmission of stories and hence terms. How does the etymology of words change? Um, so it was very fascinating. Think of it as those computer graphics that you get, where is this huge net of stuff. That is something that I personally underwent in that class,
Mm.
where there is this huge net around me and there are linkages between completely unrelated terms.
Yeah.
Who thought that something like this can happen? So it was a literature class, but it ended up tying back to my personal interest of linguistics, of geography, etc. So yeah.
I truly feel that like college on one end prepares you for an enriching career, but I think a great college or like you as a student taking the most out of your college leads to college preparing you for an enriching life beyond just your career. And so like in your case, tomorrow when you sit down on a Saturday evening and like read a piece of literature, this class that you've taken, maybe this is unrelated to what you're working on in terms of career. But when you're reading a book, you sort of are able to enhance your experience of reading the book because you studied certain concepts, certain theories, you know what's going on, you know about the author's background, all of that. So if it makes you a more enriching person, a more enriching like mind and soul, a more like have more interesting hobbies or passions like literature, even if you're an economics person or a public policy person, I feel like that's also a job well done from the college's point of view. Maybe this is not everyone's like primary goal going into college, but it can definitely be at the back of the mind, I think. And this is probably the one time in your life where you'll just dive into knowledge for knowledge's sake for most people. Where there's no KPIs, performance, salary, increments. It's just like diving deep into like the world of academia and knowledge. Um,
Another thing that Ashoka facilitates for that pursuit of knowledge is auditing courses. You can register for courses and do it like the standard course. You get grades, you get credits, etc., etc. But you also have the slots to audit two courses per semester. An audit is like you are a bona fide student in that class, but you are not supposed to give any exams or assessments. You just sit there, you are just there to learn. So I am auditing one course this coming semester, and I'm really excited for it. It's a course on environmental governance, and the course is structured around the institutions and the politics and the policies that govern environmental resources like forests, etc. So that is a course I'm doing purely for my learning. And I feel to have such an outlet is really important from the institution side, because I might want to pursue something just for the sake of wanting to know more about it. So it's like a low stakes learning venture.
what I want to do is jump to another very important topic. Actually, I'm assuming again a big assumption that some students from Ashoka might be coming from like B cities or C cities, smaller towns, and now they find themselves in this huge city of New Delhi, which has tons of opportunity and is very like different and big, and sort of the world opens to them. I personally believe it's very important to consider the city in which you're studying. Like it's not just the institution, it's the environment beyond the campus walls. Um, and so I wanted to ask you, as a young student and as a young professional in New Delhi, on a professional angle, how do you engage with the city? Like it has so much to offer.
So I would like to correct you there. Ashoka is not based in New Delhi. We are in a district of Haryana. Haryana is a nearby neighboring state of Delhi. We are based out of Sonipat. So we are not in Delhi. We are in the national capital region, but not in Delhi itself. So we are a 40-minute drive from
Okay.
Delhi.
Okay.
The college itself is in a very remote area, I would say. There are not a lot of things outside the college. The university is kind of like a bubble. You don't feel where you are when inside the campus, but it is very evident once you step out. So that is something I would say. Um, yes, we do go to Delhi often, whether for recreational purposes or just to network, go to events, go to museums, etc., etc. Delhi is a city which has a lot to offer. There's that. As far as Since Ashoka is slightly outside of the hubbub of the city, I feel it might be an easier transition for people coming from smaller towns because you are in the middle of everything, but there is some sort of a buffer between you and the
Mm.
outside world. So yeah, I feel that's transition enough, and as and when you feel the need for it, feel comfortable, you can just hop out and roam free.
Sounds like the best of both worlds, honestly.
Definitely.
Yeah, like the beauty of being in a quieter and a more peaceful, I'm guessing a more natural area, also
Yeah.
having access to like a big and bustling city. That's sort of a good location and a good like sweet spot for a university to be located in, especially since you have such a big and beautiful campus. Um, I want to touch upon definitely with you clubs at university. I think when I was talking about learning happening outside the classroom, one of the biggest avenues for that, I think, is clubs. Like even in an IIT, a lot of IITians will say that a lot of value in learning, peer connections happen through the clubs they joined outside of the classroom. So I think it's like so far in the podcast, it's been absolutely clear to me that every year, every student should be engaged in like at least one club at the university. What has been your personal experience over the first year at Ashoka with engaging with various clubs?
So Ashoka has clubs as well as academic societies. So clubs deal with um, anything from photography to dance to music, and academic societies take on a more academic note. So
Hmm.
you have a lot of societies. You have societies for political science, for international trade and foreign policy, public policy. You have history societies, economic society.
Hmm.
Um, there are quite a lot. I won't be able to name all of them. Um, I personally am a part of the Law Society. Um, I am part of the academic engagements vertical. That is where we get in touch with law experts and invite them over for seminars and interactions. Last year, we had 3 interactions with the student body, and it was quite a success. I'm also a part of the founding editorial team for the Ashoka Law Journal. So we are in the process of putting out our first volume. Um, I am the director for geostrategic studies at Ashoka Society for India Studies. So that is what I've been doing, and I'm also the election commissioner for Ashoka.
Okay.
So right before second semester ended, me and my other commissioners, there are 4 of us in the entire student body. We finished conducting elections for the student government. We had to deal with a failed presidential election and had to organize another one in the middle of exam season. So it was a very stressful time, but all turned out well.
This is a very general and a broad question, but do you feel like for a student, is it does it for most students who feel like they are slightly politically inclined or they have an interest in the institution, does it make sense to go down the student government path? And do you think you can actually provide a lot of value in a student government position?
Definitely. Our student government is really great, I would say, but I don't have anything to compare it with. I don't know the structure of other universities, but Ashoka in isolation, I feel is pretty great for a college. We have the undergraduate council. We have councils for every batch. Then we elect a House of Representatives from that. We have a speaker. We have a president, vice president. Then we also have a cabinet of ministers. So we have technology ministry, campus life ministry, ministry of academic affairs, cultural ministry, sports ministry, etc., etc. And those ministers are also elected.
Okay.
For someone who is, then you have deputy ministers, etc., and a whole team working in the ministry that comprises the entire government. So there's that. It definitely is a platform for people to get involved with, but it depends on what kind of interest you personally have. For me, in my particular case, I decided to join the election commission because I am interested in politics, just not on this side of the glass. I
Hmm.
prefer to be on that side of the glass so that I am in the middle of it, just not in those positions.
Hmm.
And I am a neutral person, I would say, and that aligns with the roles and responsibilities of the election commissioner. So I feel that's a really fitting role for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think even someone like myself, if I do not want to, like, let's say, directly be that student representative of my class, I think there are so many ways to get more deeply involved with your university, with the higher management. That looks different for so many people. In my case, what I like to do as a practice is like every semester, send out a detailed mail to the president of our university with just my thoughts and reflections on the semester so far, like what went well, what didn't go so well, macro thoughts on the institution. That's my way of engaging. I bring up a lot of points in depth with the student rep of my class, who then goes and like communicates it to their higher management, because I don't want to be taking on her responsibilities, but at the same time, like I'm sort of leaning on her. So I think it absolutely makes sense. I think everyone should have an interest in their institution. Like you're the one paying the fees, investing the time and effort to be here for 4 years. It'll only benefit you if there's any sort of positive improvement in the community. So I feel like there's the same argument made for like voting in terms of your country. I think is a very similar argument to be made here for the institution as well. Um, what I want to do quickly is rewind a little bit. You made an important distinction between like clubs versus academic societies. And so from what I'm getting, clubs are more sort of hobbies and interesting passions, and academic societies are more lean towards specific subject areas of interest. You also give us a hint in terms of academic societies, but I want to expand on that thought. What exactly goes on within an academic society at Ashoka? Like what are the kind of activities students can expect if they were to join one?
The typical society at Ashoka, for example, the political science or the public policy society at Ashoka would be divided into different verticals. One would be the social media and marketing vertical, where the people create Instagram posts and marketing material, posters, etc., etc. Then you have, say, an externals team, which would be in constant contact with maybe any potential speakers that you want to bring on board. Then you also have an equivalent of a publications team. So you will be putting out blogs, you'll be putting out opinion papers, you'll be putting out long form content
Hmm.
written. And you also might have a website. So you will be putting out articles over there, etc., etc. So it depends on your skills and your interests. You can be involved in, say, academic engagements. You can be the one responsible for hosting events. You can be, if you're a graphic designer, for example, you can be part of the marketing and social media team. If you are like really interested in, say, the academic side of foreign policy, you can be involved in the blogs team or the publications team, and you can be putting out papers. So there is something for everybody to do.
Hmm. Also,
There are
just
podcast teams as well. So you have podcasts happening as well.
that would be me if I was an Ashoka student. It's also, I mean, just as a freshman or a sophomore, such a great way to like get to know seniors who you otherwise might not bump into as you walk down the streets. Such a great way to like go get to know them, build a relationship, then pick their brain over a coffee chat afterwards in terms of like advice, personal and professional. Seniors are again like one of the most underrated resources at university. They've literally gone through a similar path, even if it's not major specific. They have made mistakes. Like please listen to them in the same way as like this podcast is sort of a call out for high schoolers to be listening to students like us who have something to share about the university experience. So yeah, I'm glad we touched on that.
Also, another thing about seniors, most of our classes have a mixture of batches in them. It's not like my batch will only attend a section of classes. So the classes, especially the FCs and the elective courses, which do not conform to, say, a major timeline, will have first years, second years, third years, fourth years. So you can interact with them in and after class as well. So that is also an avenue that Ashoka has. I don't think a lot of colleges, especially in India, have that batch intermixing in classes, especially.
That's something I'm really looking forward to next semester at Minerva, because let's say I'm taking an economics class, the intro class. I'm taking it as someone majoring in economics. Maybe someone else is taking it as an elective in their third or fourth year. So I'm going to be expecting in my class to be with third and fourth year students, which I'm so looking forward to. Like it's a new perspective in class. It's someone who's genuinely like a bit more experienced, someone who comes from a completely different major, like a CS major, literature major. I'm sure will bring like new thoughts to the class. This is also like again something new in Indian education. I'm sure like over the first and in the years to come, you will feel like those tangible small benefits of being in class with like students across the 4 years at Ashoka. Now that we're on the topic, I'm going to pick your brain a lot more about academics and classes at Ashoka. You were a typical CBSE student, so even through high school, I'm sure this is very relatable to a lot of our CBSE students listening. And I'm assuming there was some sort of a jump in terms of how Ashoka classes are structured and conducted. So, what was that jump? Like, how would you describe your typical Ashoka class or your typical course?
So you have the typical jump from school to college. Nobody's there to handhold you. Nobody is there to spoon feed you stuff. There is no hard and fast bifurcations in the syllabus. You're just given a syllabus. You're supposed to read things beforehand and then go to class and talk about it. So there's certainly a lot of freedom, but that freedom might be good for someone, might not be good for someone. There's that. As far as the examination pattern is concerned, Ashoka has exams, but not for every course. Just like how there is no use conducting a written exam for, say, a humanities subject. It might be in some cases, but usually it's not. Similarly, you can't do a math course justice by asking the students to write an essay, right?
Hmm.
So Ashoka has different varying modes of assessments. It can be a paper, it can be an open book test, it can be a pen and paper exam, it can be a take home submission, it can even be a video or a podcast. For example, in my first semester, the literature in the world course, I ended up making a short film on Othello. So it
Wow.
was a Indian scenario reimagination of Othello. So that was something, and that was the assessment. There was nothing else to it. So you had to go through whatever you had learned during the semester and then put it into your film. So the script, the message, the camera work, the all of it basically. So it
Hmm.
depends. And this liberty is given to the professors, so all the professors can decide what they want. So there is no set template, it varies. So the transition was fairly easy. I have always been a good exam taker, so that's not an apprehension for me. And as far as papers are concerned, yeah, those are really interesting, so I don't mind.
Yeah. And especially at Minerva, I really enjoyed like different modes of assignments. And so some are typical written, some are videos, some are podcasts, some are short films. These are also like interesting skills you're developing while working on an assignment about specific content. Like you're developing a video editing skill or a podcasting skill or a speaking skill, very basic, a good professional academic writing skill. I think these are like basic skills which will serve you almost regardless of career or profession. Um, you also learn two things along the way. So let's say when you're making that short film about Othello, I'm sure you did a deeper dive than even the classroom, and you learned these two extra things about Othello. So you're engaging with the content in an even deeper manner, specifically where you're interested. So I think ambiguous university assignments a opportunity to actually go ham and really explore specific interests you have within that subject area, go deep. And whenever you're given freedom, I think instead of being scared of it, use it as an opportunity to sort of tailor make the assignment to your interests or what you enjoy doing. Um, but it sounds like the mode of assessment is in that sense somewhat different from just our typical exams, written exams, where we sort of mug up and come and write on a piece
Yeah.
of. Another thing which I'm sure is different is the dynamic and the relationship student to professor at Ashoka versus your dynamic with your teachers in high school. So how is that different?
Uh, I certainly have more things to talk about. Being in college, especially in a format like that of Ashoka, gives me more freedom to just mess around and think about things that wouldn't have been possible in the straight jacket of CBSE.
Mm,
There was not a lot of room for additional thought. You were given something, you process it, you memorize it, you rote learn it, whatever, and then you put it out in an exam. So there was nothing, there was limited interaction with the content. But in college, the people around me, the things that I'm being taught, and the freedom that I've been given, there's a lot of room for me to engage with the content, and that enables me to talk to the professor more. So
mm.
you can talk about the course content, what that made you feel like, there's something you're forming a link with, or just general chat.
We've spent some time talking about the more serious topics of academics and clubs at Ashoka. I want to take this conversation into a fun section for a moment and talk about some interesting new. This is also something many people miss out at university, which is the opportunity to get your feet dirty into like so many interesting random hobbies and passions. Your university will offer you like the weirdest of clubs or the weirdest of facilities to get into this random sport you never even knew existed. Such opportunities are like worth taking. And so I know you have personal experience with this. Over the first year, Ashoka, any new hobbies or passions you developed?
So, one of the things that I started doing after at Ashoka is shooting. So, I am now doing shooting. I've always been an athlete, whether it be badminton, basketball, and now shooting. I went to nationals for badminton, I've played state for basketball, and now shooting is also there. So, it's something that I started at Ashoka. We have a range, we have a lot of sporting facilities, and I made the team in my first semester. I've been on the team for 2 semesters now, wanting to get back soon again.
Yeah.
So that is something that I started doing, and I wouldn't have if not at Ashoka.
Hmm.
So that is something new. There is also always scope for new things popping up, things that might not even be on your radar.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid. Try things out. And I'm sure something will come out of them.
For sure, like being open-minded on one side and also on the other side, utilizing like the crazy amount of facilities your university has to offer in terms of a lot of them having spectacular gyms and sports facilities. As I said, there's so many various clubs. How did you even like stumble across shooting in the first place? How did you come across?
So in the first week we were on campus. It's called O Week at Ashoka, Orientation Week. You have these guided sessions in the evening for every sport that the university offers. So we have like 15 sports that are offered, whether it be basketball, volleyball, tennis, swimming, etc., etc., squash, pool, badminton. One of them was shooting. I happened to go there. My roommate dragged me there, in fact.
Uh,
And I ended up liking it, and here I am. Turned out to be quite good at it. I shoot the 10-meter air pistol, so you need a lot of arm and shoulder strength for that. My background with badminton turned out to help me in this particular scenario.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
A welcome break from the intensity of like academics and college life, I'm sure.
definitely.
Also learning some life lessons along the way in terms of the sportsman spirit. And there's like I could go on a whole rant there, but I'll keep it at
One
that.
of my shooting team comprises my group of very good friends.
Uh-huh.
The team, shooting is an individual sport, right? There is no team as such in it. But I feel that my team, the shooting team, is one of the better teams out there as compared to sports that are actually played in teams. So our team is like really close. We
Yeah.
have lunch, we have parties together, we go out and celebrate stuff. One of our captains graduated this last semester, so we threw him a farewell party.
Hmm.
So goes on to show just how close we have become. So yeah, you can find your people in unexpected places as well. So don't be scared.
That's a good nugget. Like you can find your people in unexpected places as well, sort of trying different things. And especially where people going to huge public universities, it's very important to find smaller communities of interest. That could be like just cultural Indian community, That could be a specific obsession or a passion, academic, non-academic. This is where you'll find your people from like this much wider student body. Which I'm like, not everyone is a person who will eventually become an acquaintance or a friend, but like going deep into those specific relationships is like crucial. Um, Before we dive into what you want to do post graduation, we've touched upon this, but I want to really like lay all the potential weapons out. This is for a student who is having trouble convincing their parents, either for them to just apply to Ashoka, or even worse, like they've gotten into Ashoka and they want to go there, but the parents have a lot of like apprehensions. What's a message specifically to students and parents like that from an Ashoka student like yourself?
So I would advise you to approach the problem very systematically. I would like you to sit down and have a chat with your parents to lay out your expectations very clear. What do you plan to get out of a college education? What do you want to do in the future? Is money a problem? What kind of money do you want to earn in any job that you do? So set those things out. It will certainly help you going forward. And then think about university in a very objective way. Think about the professors, the people, the fees especially because money is an important part. Think about the subjects that you want to study. If I want to study, say, computer science or physics, IISc might be a better option for me. It might be better as compared to Ashoka. If I want to study computer science, IITs might be better, or even Ashoka might be better. It depends on what you want to get out of that education.
Hmm.
Ashoka CS major teaches you different things as compared to a BTech from an IIT.
Yeah.
So the end result is different. So identify what you want to get and then make an objective decision. Because all the extra things are just the frills outside. You have to deal with the difficult stuff. So swallow the toad kind of. You'll have to do that. It's a difficult conversation. Talk about it. Make them make sense. Make your parents understand. It's a new concept. It's fairly new. They might have trouble understanding it or comprehending it. But yeah, you should try it. If it's meant to be, it'll happen. But don't give up very easily. You'll have to make them understand. Think of it as another step in your application because parents are important. Parents are not going anywhere, and it's better to burn any bridges, right? So I would advise you to lay it out all on a big sheet of paper or a board. I personally have a chalkboard and
Uh,
I did a lot of brain picking on that.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, show them this episode. Also, yeah, I think get your, if possible, it's always lovely to be talking to current students. And so that is definitely harder at a smaller school like Minerva or Ashoka, which hasn't existed. But I think if you reach out far enough, you will find this XYZ connection who goes to Ashoka. Please like sit down with them, have a coffee chat. Current students are generally, in my opinion, very open about both what's going great at XYZ institution and also what's not going so great. Like as a Minervan, if you approach me, I'd be very clear with what I'm really enjoying about Minerva and what are a few things that I'm not enjoying as much. Current students are the best way, much more candid than like something like the official website or speaking to a prof or an admissions officer who all have like some sort of interest. The current student, 9 out of 10 times, will have just your interest in mind. That would be
Definitely.
my
And if
number one.
need be, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help.
For sure. Yeah. We'll be sharing your contact info towards the very
Yeah.
end. But yeah, please do reach out. I'm here for the Minervan perspective with a degree from Ashoka University in economics and public policy with a minor in international relations. I know you're just entering sophomore year, so no sort of um, you don't have to like be super specific, but just so like we fast forward a little bit, give you as an idea as to where you're headed. What do you potentially see yourself doing after graduation?
I definitely want to study more. I feel a bachelor's is not enough. So I definitely want to go for a master's program. a PhD after that, or even a direct PhD. It might be immediately after Ashoka, it might be deferred, it might be after 2, 3 years. I'm not sure yet. I don't even know what I'll study. I just know that I have this need to study more, and that's all right for now.
Mm. Long term, what's like, let's say let's say you were living the dream career. What would be the ideal type of work that you'd love to do? And this could be like 10 years down the line.
I want to work in the policy world. It can be interpreted in many ways. You can also be doing groundwork. You can be working in, say, think tanks. You can be consulting. I think consulting as a field has a lot of potential because I have been surrounded by a lot of consultants, and the sheer variety that comes with that job is, I don't think any other field can offer such a dynamic job. I really admire the people around me, one of them being my mother and the people that I work with. And yeah, so I'm taking inspiration from them, taking elements and then creating my own vision.
Awesome. It's been a great conversation. I've learned a lot about Ashoka. If I were to study in India, I think that would be my school, which I would gravitate towards. I'm hoping a lot of mental barriers and limitations have been broken for students and parents listening to the episode. I hope you've learned about Ashoka as an institution, about the application process, what makes it different, the whole concept of liberal arts as an approach to education. I think we've covered so much ground so far, and it's time to sort of begin wrapping up. So we'll jump into our fast fire round of questions. I'll have to end each episode on a high, sort of have a quick to and fro, have the listeners also know a different personal side of you. So this is just going to be a few quick questions, and the challenge for you is to be answering in one phrase or one sentence maximum. Um, what we will start with is, thus far, your favorite professor at Ashoka and one reason why.
My favorite professor is Professor Jonathan Gill Harris. He's the one who taught me the FC literature and the world. Um, that linguistics, geography, Shakespeare, Ovid, and the movie, of course. So, more than enough to like him and his course.
For sure. Um, what's a new skill or a new mindset that you've developed since entering Ashoka over this 1 year?
I would say reinventing yourself. Do not let this version of you be the final version. You can only do so much as you allow yourself to do. So, keep doors open and keep reinventing yourself
Mm.
because it's never finished.
Yeah, I really like that. Um, we all miss things about school. What do you miss most about school or being like a school girl?
My friends and my teachers. No seniors, no alumni, nobody from my school has gone to Ashoka. So, very alone in that sense. And my teachers, I was really close to them. I go and visit them every time I'm home.
For the non-Indian listeners of this episode, or maybe some of the Indian listeners as well, who are sort of like, cool name. What does Ashoka really mean? Like, what does it stand for?
So, the university is named after the great Emperor Ashoka, who is supposed to be the epitome of India. And his values famously centered around liberal thought and education. So,
Hmm.
that is what the university and its structure is wanting to imbibe, hence Ashoka.
You're a very voracious reader. Part of your application was also the 5 books. What's any book recommendation that you think would be a must read for any high schooler listening to this episode?
A book that I read recently and I really like, actually have it right here. Like, it's called The Tomb of Sand. It's by Gitanjali Shri. It won the Booker Prize in 2022. And it's about this very old mother who befriends a transgender person, and that really surprises her daughter because her daughter considers herself to be the hip and modern and up with everything kind of person, and is very surprised when her mother also becomes something like that, even better than the daughter, I'd say. And yeah, so it's a really nice book. You should definitely read it. It is along the lines of change, and acceptance that change does happen around you, and people unexpectedly people change, people you think don't have the capacity to. So yeah,
That's immediately on my list. I've never heard of this book before, but it's like,
you should read it. It's originally written in Hindi and
okay,
it has been translated into English, but the translation has done a really good job.
very cool. Lastly, and maybe I'm gonna give you leeway for this answer to be a bit longer among the fast five because this is actually something we haven't talked about so far on the episode, which is study abroad at Ashoka, which I'm sure is like an invaluable opportunity to immerse yourself in a new environment and a new culture. So, say like two sentences about study abroad at Ashoka, plus the fast fire question is, what would be your ideal study abroad destination from all your options?
I personally want to go to Japan and
Okay.
Australia. So there's that. And I feel abroad at Ashoka would take more than two lines. The study abroad program is very robust, I would say. The office is constantly working on partnerships and whatnot. We have programs with Stanford, Cornell, LSE, King's, Monash. We
Wow.
have with Sciences Po, we have with Yale, we have with UC Berkeley,
Wow.
and then many more that I can't remember. So it's full of opportunity. I definitely want to go abroad, at least for a semester or a summer, I would say. We have summer abroad programs, we had semester abroad programs, we have years as well. So that's something that's on my bucket list. So that's something I really like.
The follow-up is why Japan?
Why Japan? Oh, I really like Japan. Nothing big.
Okay, just an interesting cultural immersion. In fact, they've added Tokyo to the Minerva list. Unfortunately, not for our class, but I think for the class of 2029. So if anyone's listening, interested in Minerva, like just know that Tokyo is going to be one of your cities, which is a big regret. Like I wish we had it. Lastly, we will wrap up this conversation as we do on each episode with one final message. So if you had to sort of not summarize, but leave listeners with one final message, these could be students, this could be parents listening, one final piece of advice or wisdom which encapsulates like what you've learned over the first year at Ashoka. What would that final thing you want to say be?
Mm, don't be wary of uncertainty. Um, Whenever a door closes, it's another door opening.
Hmm.
You might think that if even a single thing goes wrong, it might all come falling down like a house of cards. But that's not the case. Things are hardly ever so bad.
Hmm.
Uh, so don't be scared of reinventing yourself, picking up the pieces and then changing one thing at a time. Even if things go wrong, take one step at a time. And similar to the ship of Theseus, if you don't know what that is, please look it up. If you take one step at a time, you would have reinvented yourself without even realizing. So
Hmm.
if it becomes very overwhelming, don't look at the big picture. Take look at what is in front of you, and it will become much more manageable. And uncertainty is nothing to be scared of. Change, adapt, be agile, be malleable, fit to the situations around you, and it'll all be fine. Don't worry. Things seem really bad when you're in the middle of it, but they have a way of resolving themselves when
Hmm.
it comes to call.
Yeah, adaptability is really that key word. I've seen it come through in this episode as well with you as to how you were open-minded and adaptable, and that's how you picked up shooting. That's how you're at Ashoka. That's why you purposefully said that no, take all the nine courses. How can you choose what is more interesting to you? I see that like physically coming through this episode. And so I think that's the beauty of it. Also, the shape of thesis is so interesting because it's like after the end of it, is it even the shape of thesis anymore? Like it's completely a new sort of body. Like you can even give it a new name. And so maybe that's like a metaphor also for how someone transforms through this university journey if they like set their mind to it. Um, Speaking even further about adaptability, and when you said that one door closing might be multiple doors opening, I think this is the point where we release one last final like boom or something that is quite unexpected on this particular episode, which is the fact that you were actually originally a Minervan. So we were originally going to be classmates in the class of 2027. You got in, you enrolled, everything had gone right. And then there was a specific back injury and a long process of debate and discussion, following which you ultimately decided not to come to Minerva and attend Ashoka instead. So that is sort of this last piece of suspense released for listeners also. This is why we sort of have this chemistry going on even before this episode. But say more about this journey and looking back on this. It's been more than a year since you made that decision. How do you feel about that decision today?
So during 12th grade, I actually dislocated my knee in a basketball injury. Uh, One of my class teammates fell on me sideways, and I broke my knee as a result of that. And the injury also caused me to slip two discs in my spine. So that is what became a bigger issue going on when I was enrolling for Minerva. Optimal. I wasn't in optimal health, so I decided not to go to another country where it would be difficult in case of an emergency. So that is why I decided to go to Ashoka because it was my India option. And that is where I also feel change plays an important part in my life because obstacles are always there. There will be situations where you don't anticipate what is going to happen. You can't foresee an injury. You can't see what is going to happen to you. You just have to take it in your stride. You have to become big enough to swallow it whole. So keep on changing. Don't be made out of glass. Don't like break at the smallest inconvenience. Take it in your stride. It'll all work out. After my injury, I thought I wouldn't be able to play any sports, and that was a really big disappointment for me, having been an athlete all my life. And that is where shooting came in. From having no expectations to now being part of this wonderful community.
Yeah.
So things change for the better.
I love it, and I'm sure there was a reason why this happened, why we're not destined to be classmates. I don't see what the reason is. I don't know. I'm not convinced, but sort of I'm sure there's a larger plan at play. Life keeps happening while we're planning, right? Is a quote I love. Like life happens while you're busy making plans for life. And I think again, adaptability is what I'll come back to here. I don't want to like ruin this really emotional moment and the very lovely story you told, but I will just come back to this point of adaptability again and again, especially as someone so young, where you have the ability and the mindset to be like pivoting so consistently, which is not something our parents might have at this age, where they're more well settled. So like use that youth to be adaptable.
Definitely. You can choose to sulk around and be sad for something that is long gone, or you can choose to embrace your new path, your new direction. You can choose to completely cut off from your potential path. I could have chosen to not stay in touch with my Minerva friends, but I chose not to.
Yeah.
So now I have friends like you are, yeah, obviously. And that's a conscious decision you have to make. So, sure, you can have the best of both worlds. Don't let something else go being sad for something else.
Okay, brilliant. I think that was the episode. If a listener wants to connect with you, Trigya, and this could be, as we've said, the listeners who want to hear from an Ashoka senior in case they're convincing their parents, or just anybody is curious to connect, has follow-up questions, find some interests aligning, what do you think is a good way to reach you?
You can reach me through LinkedIn. My profile is spelled the same way as you can probably see in the video somewhere. Um, Send me a note when you send me a connect. Let me know we came here from the podcast, and I'll be sure to connect with you.
And that's the way I'll wrap up the episode from my end. Overall, thank you for your wise words on the podcast on Uni Unveiled, and it was my pleasure to host you, Trigya.
Thank you, Ara. Thank you so much for having me. I had such a lovely time being on the episode. Thank you so much.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.